What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Oh, that got dark. Covering up the lights. Anyways, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today I want to talk to all you prospective home buyers out there and figure out whether you should buy an existing home or maybe build a new home. In my last video, we talked about the crazy state of the real estate market right now. And for those of you about to buy a home, there's a lot to consider. But fear not, I'm here to help, so let's get into it. We'll walk you through the pros and cons of buying versus building. So if you're still in the hunt for a house, you may be debating the differences between buying a house and building a house. So let's get into some of the pros and cons there. First off, building a house. Building a house from scratch is definitely a whole different ball game from buying an existing house. For instance, finding a suitable plot of land, hiring an architect, finding a builder, and doing all this in an area that you like may be relatively difficult. If you're not buying a spot in an existing neighborhood, you need to be cognizant of whether you'll have access to municipal utilities like water and electric, and if not, will you need to pay for taps to get into those systems? These are all some basic considerations that you really need to take into account and factor into your budget before you even start building your house. This is where joining an existing development can help kind of streamline the process, but you may be sacrificing on some of those unique choices that led you to build a home in the first place. For instance, if you're contracting with a builder in an existing development, you may be limited to certain floor plans or certain fixtures when it comes to finishing your house. Not the end of the world for everyone, but again, if you are in this to really create a unique home for you and your unique needs, you need to keep that in mind, that you just may be limited on some of those things going the development route. On the plus side, a new build compared to an existing build is going to let you use state-of-the-art materials and often energy-saving utilities and appliances that will help you save on your monthly energy costs. In addition to that, newer home builds are generally more appealing from a resale perspective, for the same reasons that a new build might be more appealing to you. You're getting all new materials, so you have less to worry about in terms of unexpected repairs, and oftentimes if you're doing this through a builder, they'll have warranties on the structure and what's in it, so it takes some of the stress off of you having to worry about anything going wrong in those first few years. The two major downsides to new builds, however, is one, the cost. They're generally more expensive than buying an existing home. And two, the timeline. It generally takes at least 6 to 7 months for a new home build. And sometimes you can run into snags in these timelines as well, where you're spending extra time before your house is built, or there's extra costs that come into play that you didn't account for. So these are all something you kind of need to take into account if you're selling your home or if you're renting. You need to have a little bit of a flexible situation where you can account for it taking longer than expected to build your new home. One way to kind of safeguard yourself here is to make sure you pay special attention to the contract you're signing with your builder. Have you agreed upon a lump sum amount for the total home cost, or is it variable where, increasing costs of materials could change what you ultimately pay? That's going to be a tricky situation, especially with the current market and fluctuations in raw materials. You want to probably stay closer to a contract that has a definite amount that you're going to pay for that property. Another thing to watch out for is just make sure that there is an established timeline with your builder of when certain steps are going to be completed. This will help keep you and your builder on track and to see whether or not you're ahead or behind schedule. For instance, if it's 2 months before you're supposed to take ownership of the house and they haven't even finished the foundation, that's going to be a problem. You're way behind schedule at that point, but you won't really know that unless there's already a defined timeline for all these steps. And the last thing, just make sure to stay in constant communication with the contractor or whoever is managing the lead on building your home. Know who that one person is that you can call to check in, and make it a point to call them often. As the term out of sight, out of mind is as true with general contractors as it is for anything else. If they don't hear from you or you're not keeping in touch on a regular basis, there's always a chance that things could fall behind schedule without you even knowing. And a couple more sneaky little costs involved in building your own home. Generally, builders aren't always including the cost of any landscaping in the price, and also those interior finishes. Things like blinds are usually not included. Obviously, any furniture, that's all going to be additional costs if you don't have anything that you're bringing over yourself. And one more thing to look into, this varies by location, but oftentimes you may be required to do an economic impact study if you're building a house on a plot of land to see how that additional housing is going to affect utilities such as waste removal, the electric system, etc. Generally, this probably isn't going to be your responsibility if you're working with a builder in an established development, but if you're going it your own on a plot of land, these are all things that you're going to need to consider. So all of that about building your own home is true in any case, any situation, but this being 2020, 2021, we have the unique situation of this global pandemic on our hands, which has just thrown everything into a tizzy, including building your own home. So what do I mean by that? Basically what I'm talking about here is the cost of raw materials to build a home, especially lumber and even steel and steel framed housing, has been skyrocketing throughout the pandemic. As of February 2021, rough lumber costs have risen 112% compared to last year. And the wood framing that makes up the construction of most homes is often about 18 to 20% of the total cost. So think about that, 112% increase on something that's 20% of the cost of your home. Let's do some quick math on that. If you're buying a $500,000 home to be built, $100,000 of that is going to be framing. 112% increase in that puts you over $200,000, so you added $100,000 to the cost of your home. That's obviously nothing to sneeze at and something that you need to take into consideration. So why has this happened? Well, in the early days of the pandemic, like many other industries, the lumber industry didn't really know what this was going to do. Many had to shut down operations completely, and even ones that did remain running or reopened had to work with a reduced workforce due to social distancing regulations. This means that overall output was going to be less, and even lost time from manufacturing would put strains on supply chain and really had kind of a ripple effect throughout the industry. Combine that with the fact that 2019 numbers for new construction have been down, so forecasts for 2020 were already going to be lighter. Then you have the shutdowns and the complete surge in demand, which led to a serious supply and demand issue in the lumber industry. And to take it a step further, the past decade of new home construction has been on the decline. So all these producers had already scaled back their operations in terms of what the demand was for new housing construction. Then all of a sudden 2020 hits, there's this crazy surge in demand, there's lower supply than there's ever been, and you have this insane increase in the price of lumber. The Fed's lowering rates, people want to buy houses, cheap interest, perfect storm, right? But that's not it. You also have all these people remote working from home, stuck at home all day, bars and restaurants are closed, they got nothing to do, might as well renovate the house, right? All the new decks built during the pandemic, all the new construction done inside the house, all of these things required raw timber and lumber, taking away from the available supply for new home construction. So that's crazy. I know, maybe you don't want to build a house anymore. You've lost the taste for it. So let's look at buying an existing house. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons there. So the biggest pro here is that it's generally going to be less expensive than building your own house. The very obvious fact that you don't have to pay those increased lumber prices because the house is already built of existing lumber. And also obviously all the materials have already been sourced, you're not paying the labor for it to be assembled, the house already exists, which leads to it just being overall cheaper. The downside here obviously being that you don't get to customize it. What you see is what you get, and you may be left with a less than desirable floor plan. And if you do decide to do any renovations to it, that's something you want to factor into the price going in. If you know you're going to have to redo that kitchen as soon as you take ownership of the home, well, there's $30,000 you're going to need right there. If you're going to need to be doing renovations, you're going to need to be leaving some room in your budget for that. There's also the fact that everything in your home has a lifespan. So appliances, major appliances like your furnace, your HVAC system, those all have a lifespan. A standard shingled roof is going to have a lifespan of about 25 years. So that's something that hopefully your home inspector will be able to get an idea for. When were these systems put into place? When was the roof put on? So you'll know about how much life is left in it. You'll also want to do this for, like I said, the major appliances like your furnace, or see if your inspector can do that. Every furnace is going to be printed with a manufacture date on it. It's not always right on the outside of the furnace or super evident where it's going to be. It could be on the inside. So that's why I say it might be better for your inspector to do this, but it's going to tell you when that furnace was produced. If it's 10 years old, then you may think you have another 10 to get out of it. If it's 18 years old, then you're going to want to consider the fact that once you take ownership of that home, you're going to want to start budgeting for a new furnace because it could kick it any day. So we talked about timeline on building a home, at least 7 months. On the flip side, with buying an existing home, the timeline is much shorter. Generally, you can get from making an offer to closing and moving in within a couple of months. Another benefit to existing homes, and this is not always the case, but a general rule of thumb is that you're probably going to be closer to major cities and major attractions. This is obviously because most of the surrounding area around big cities has already been developed. If you're building a new home, it's probably going to be a little bit more rural or suburban, where there's empty land that you can build on. And if you're looking at older homes, you can also end up with less of a cookie cutter type of neighborhood. Generally, you see these developments that are all being built at the same time. The houses have 2 or 3 different floor plans, so all the houses kind of look the same on the outside. Now, some people don't mind this, there's nothing wrong with that, but generally with older homes, you didn't have the scale of development that they do today, so you may just have a little bit more unique layouts. Another thing to consider with existing homes is, again, that landscaping piece. You're gonna have what we would call mature landscaping. You're gonna have trees that have been there for decades and have been able to grow tall and strong. And this actually isn't just for aesthetics either. A strategically placed tree can actually help reduce the cooling costs of your house in the summer. So all that shade from the big oak tree in your front yard, that's reducing the amount that you're paying on your electricity bill every month. This isn't always the case, obviously, but again, like I say, it is something to still consider. One other thing to consider with buying an existing home, especially in today's market, is that you're going to be competing with other buyers. This can be a bit of a stressful situation if you have multiple bids on a property. You obviously don't have that situation once you've bought a piece of land to build a house on. There's no right or wrong answer here to either buy existing or build new. But one thing to consider is that first-time home buyers statistically stay in their homes 4 years less than people who have previously purchased homes. So that is to say that if this is your first time buying a home, you may consider buying an existing home so as not to pay that additional premium for something that you may not stay in long term. But if customizability and having exactly what you want is important to you, and you're willing to pay that additional premium and have it within your budget, then there's also nothing wrong with building your own home. Either way, the choice is yours. There's a lot of joy that comes with being a homeowner, and there's also a lot of cost. If you're totally new to home buying, I suggest you check out my other video. I'm gonna link it somewhere up here. It's an introduction to everything you need to know before buying a home and all the hidden costs that exist. So give that a look as well. All right, that's all I got for you guys in this one. Please, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give me a like down below. And if you enjoy this kind of content, also go ahead and subscribe so you get notified anytime I post more videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.